It was the spring of 1993, a time that should have been filled with the usual teenage excitement, finishing high school, hanging out with friends, working my part-time job at Burger King. It was routine, predictable, until one night changed everything. Friday and Saturday shifts were always late. The drive-thru stayed open until 1 a.m., and more often than not, I was the last one to leave. Eric, my manager, usually walked me out, watched me get to my car before locking up. But that night, things were different. I still remember the heavy feeling in the air when he hurriedly asked if he could skip watching me walk to my car, just this once. He had somewhere to be, something more important than the usual routine. "Yeah, sure. I'm fine," I told him, but I had no idea what was coming. That is when it all began. Eric opened the door for me. I walked out, yelled back good night, and took off walking to my car. I heard him locking the door behind me. I looked back and saw him running to his office. We usually parked far away to give the customers the best parking spots, so I was walking for like 20 seconds when I heard a noise. It sounded like a plastic bag rustling in the wind. I immediately thought, did I leave some trash on the sidewalk? Maybe someone forgot to throw it in the dumpster. So I turned around and looked at the ground surrounding the building. But I saw nothing. I kept walking toward my car. The noise persisted, getting louder. I turned again, looked up, and then I saw it. There, on the roof of Burger King, it looked like a large black trash bag, blowing in the wind. But something was off. It wasn't just flapping aimlessly. It seemed stuck. I tried to think, is there something on the roof? Maybe an antenna, some kind of beam? Anything that could make sense of what I was seeing? But then, I noticed the size of the bag. It wasn't just a bag. It looked like a person, covered in this thin plastic-like material, shifting, blowing in the wind. I strained my eyes, trying to see the legs, the feet. But there was nothing. Our parking lot lights were off, so I was standing in darkness. But the car dealership behind Burger King cast a huge amount of light. And this thing, whatever it was backlit, perfectly outlined against the glow. I looked at the bottom of it again, expecting to see legs or some connection to the roof, but there was nothing there. It was hovering. I could see light shining under it. No legs, no antenna, no beams. Nothing holding it up. I felt a strange, heavy sensation, like I was being watched. My heart started pounding. I knew I shouldn't take my eyes off of it. But I had to make sure. Am I imagining this? Quickly, I glanced at the door I had just come from, hoping to see Eric, maybe coming outside, maybe noticing this thing too. But I saw nothing. It was 1:30 a.m. There wasn't much traffic around. I started walking backward, slowly, toward my car. My eyes never left that thing. This was 1993, and I had an old 1987 Dodge Omni. I had to use a key to unlock the door, none of that fancy key fob stuff back then. I fumbled with the key, my hands trembling, but I never looked away. Not for a second. Finally, I unlocked the car. I got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was following me. I kept looking up, at the sky. Could it fly? I don't know why, but I thought it could. I sped home, heart racing, and when I pulled into my driveway, I ran inside and locked the door behind me. My family was asleep. I stood at the window, peeking through the blinds, watching, waiting. But it never followed. It took me years to tell my family about what I saw that night. When I finally did, my cousin, who dabbled in white magic, told me that what I saw was a manifestation of dark magic. She asked if there had ever been someone who harassed me, someone who might have wanted something from me. I stared at her, and a memory hit me like a punch to the gut. There had been someone, a man. He used to come to Burger King all the time. He was much older. I was only 18. He must have been in his 30s. He would buy a medium tea, sit there for hours, getting free refills, just watching me. Then he started asking for my number, asking me out, insisting. He wouldn't stop. Eventually, my managers had to kick him out. We even called the police. After that, he stopped coming around. I told my cousin about him, and she looked me dead in the eye. "That thing you saw, that was him," she said. "Some people will go to great lengths to get what they want. You must have a strong, protective spirit around you, something he couldn't defeat. That's why it left you alone." Her words sent a chill down my spine. Even now, years later, when I think about that night, I still get chills. That thing, whatever it was, it left me alone. But I'll never forget how it hovered, how it watched me. And every time I see the movie Jeepers Creepers, I'm reminded of that night. Except, the thing I saw was wrapped in a thin black plastic bag, and it still haunts me to this day. There's a place in every town, the kind of place no one dares talk about after dark. In this town, the old house at the edge of town had always been the one place people avoided. It had been empty for years, windows boarded up, doors chained shut. Yet, every single night, a light flickered on in the attic. A dim, ghostly light that would cast strange shadows across the walls, making anyone who passed by feel uneasy. No one knew why or who turned on that light, but the stories were enough to keep people away. The house used to belong to the Wilkins family, just a quiet couple with their small daughter. Then one night, the entire family vanished without a trace. When they were gone, the only thing left behind was a dinner table set for 3 and a single doll lying on the floor. The townspeople searched everywhere, but the Wilkinses were never found. The house was eventually sealed off, and since then, it became the stuff of whispered legends, something people only spoke about in hushed tones. Years went by, and the house just kept falling apart. Still, no one dared go near it, especially at night when that attic light flickered on, steady as a heartbeat. But one night, some teenagers decided they'd had enough of the stories, and they wanted to see the inside for themselves. It was a dare, and they were more than happy to prove how tough they were. They pried off the boards, cut through the chains, and pushed open that creaking front door. The air inside hit them right away, cold, stale, smelling like dust and decay. They wandered through the house. Their flashlights revealed furniture covered in old, decaying sheets, cobwebs hanging from the ceiling, and wallpaper peeling away like something was rotting inside the walls. But as they climbed the stairs to the attic, the air grew colder, and the light above them grew brighter with every step they took. When they reached the attic door, something made them stop. The light wasn't flickering anymore. Instead, it was shining, too bright, too intense, like whatever was behind that door was waiting for them. One of the boys, wanting to prove he wasn't scared, shoved the door open. The attic was almost empty, almost. There was just a single chair facing the window, and on that chair sat a doll. Its porcelain face was cracked, and its eyes, wide, staring directly at them. The light, it seemed like it was coming from the doll, casting these long, eerie shadows all over the room. As they got closer, they noticed something off. The doll's eyes, they weren't just painted glass. It felt like they were following them, tracking their every move. Worse still, its mouth, once stitched into a delicate smile, was now twisted into an open, silent scream. And that's when they heard it. A soft, rhythmic creaking, like the sound of someone slowly rocking back and forth in the chair. The shadows on the walls suddenly came alive. They started to writhe, to twist, like they were trying to break free. The light began to dim. The room now plunged into a near darkness. Out of nowhere, the attic door slammed shut behind them, locking them inside. The creaking grew louder, more frantic. The shadows closed in, and they started to take shape, hands reaching out, faces contorted in pure agony, eyes filled with a terror so deep it left them frozen. The teenagers tried screaming, pounding on the door, but it wouldn't budge. The shadows continued to swarm around them, the air getting colder, thicker. It was choking them, suffocating them with an invisible force. The last thing they saw before the darkness consumed them completely was the doll. Its eyes, glowing now with an unnatural light, and its mouth, moving, like it was silently laughing at them. The next morning, the house was silent again. That attic light, it was out. The door? Still chained shut, as if no one had been inside at all. But if you looked closely at the attic window, you could see something different, a faint, ghostly face staring out. Its mouth twisted into a scream, and its eyes, filled with terror that would never go away. And if you were brave enough to walk by the house at night, you might just hear it, the soft, rhythmic creaking of that chair rocking back and forth. And you'd feel it, the eyes of the watcher, following your every move, waiting for the next person foolish enough to step inside. It's a story I've kept to myself for a while now, one that's haunted me every time I think back on it. I've always had a fascination with the paranormal. Strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena have been part of my life for as long as I can remember. Strange things have happened to me, things I couldn't explain, but nothing ever prepared me for what I'm about to share. This experience wasn't just disturbing because of what happened. No, it was far worse because it happened inside my own home, a home that I share with my wife, my sister-in-law, and my son. What I'm about to tell you is why I stopped seeking the paranormal altogether, and why I'll never make that mistake again. It all began when I bought an Ouija board. You've heard the stories, right? How Ouija boards can stir up things best left undisturbed. I thought it was just a fun, spooky thing to try, until I found out the hard way. It's not something to mess with. We already had strange things happening in the house before the Ouija board came into the picture. Little things, noises we couldn't explain, objects moving on their own. I'd see cups fly off tables for no reason, with no one even near them. One incident I'll never forget. My son, who was barely talking at the time, walked into the bathroom. He wandered over to a corner, near the washing machine, and started reaching out, like he was trying to grab something, or someone, who wasn't there. I grabbed him, got out of that room as fast as I could. And that was before I used the Ouija board. Then I started using it. Every time I played with it, I talked to a spirit, one that called itself Delaware. Del seemed harmless at first, friendly even. But then I got curious, started digging. I looked up old death records in my county, and that's when I found her. Delcy Ray, a girl who had died in a car accident, in the same county where I lived. That's when it all started to get even weirder. Del told me she was 6 when she died, but according to the records, Delcy was 9. Maybe Del saw the numbers wrong, or maybe I misunderstood. Either way, it was a little too close to be a coincidence. The more I used the board, the worse things got. Objects would move from one side of the room to the other, when my back was turned. Then there was the chair. We had this small chair on our front porch, a little kid's chair for my son. It would always sit up against the house, facing the road. But some days when I'd come home, it would be turned, facing the front door. I brushed it off at first. My in-laws were always in and out, so I assumed they'd moved it. But one day, something happened that still gives me chills to think about. It was just me and my sister-in-law at home. I had been there for about 30 minutes, when I heard a noise from the porch. I walked towards the window and looked outside, nothing. But then I turned toward the door, which was only a few feet away from the window. I opened the door, and there it was. The chair, now turned, facing the front door. My heart dropped. I yelled for my sister-in-law, who ran out and saw it too. She had no idea that this had been happening before, so when I told her, she freaked out. But that's not even the worst of it. One night, I was home alone. We had recently gotten a pet pig, partly to distract ourselves from the weird things happening. We even joked about blaming the pig for the strange noises. At this point, we had baby gates set up to keep the pig from getting into the living room. So there I was, playing video games, trying to enjoy my night. It was late, probably around midnight. Everyone was gone, and it was just me and the pig in the house. That's when it happened. I suddenly felt like I was being watched. You know that feeling, when you can just sense someone's eyes on you. I turned around, and there, peeking around the doorway, was a girl. She was pale, with long black hair and dark, empty eyes. She was reaching for the baby gate, and then, in an instant, she was gone. I screamed. My friends on the other end of my headset thought I was being attacked, maybe even robbed. I was freaking out, yelling for someone to come over. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stayed there, my back against the TV, watching both entrances to the room, until my friend finally showed up. The next day, we saged the entire house, and I made a vow that I would never use an Ouija board in my own house again. To this day, I can't explain what I saw, or what happened. All I know is that whatever we had been dealing with wasn't harmless, and it certainly wasn't a game. I've left out some of the other things that happened, but trust me when I say, this was just the tip of the iceberg. It was enough to make me stop seeking the paranormal altogether, and I'm never going back.